Hi there, Journalism 332 students. My name is Brent Appling, and I am the librarian for the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. This lecture will help you get started with library research, which will help with your group project and research report for this class. The main portion of your project that this lecture will help the most with is the literature review portion. I know much of what you're going to be working on is actually primary research methods, but one thing that's going to inform those methods is going to be the literature review that you perform while exploring your research questions that you come up with. So just a brief intro to what a literature review even is, just in case you've never engaged with this level of research. So basically it's an evaluative report of information found in the literature related to your selected area of study. So we'll talk about research questions in a moment, but basically once you come up with your research question, you do some searches based on that and find out as much information as you can based on those parameters. So your review then should describe, summarize, and evaluate and even clarify the literature. So you're kind of summarizing what you find based on the research that is related to your research question. It should give you a theoretical base and help determine the nature of your own primary research. So the purpose of all this is to convey to the reader what knowledge and ideas have been established on a topic and how those ideas relate to your design research question. And this could also just be showing the gaps in the research as well and explaining how your research, your primary research, will help fill those gaps. So there's some pretty simple steps on how to really complete a literature review. So first is going to be to form a research question or research questions, depending on how big your project is. Second is going to be to search, and part of this is also identifying the best places to search, and we'll talk about that throughout this lecture. 3 is evaluating and incorporating the sources you find effectively, and that also does mean ethically citing your sources throughout your work, as well as citing your sources in a bibliography at the end. So the in-text citations are going to be really important when doing your literature review. So looking at that first step then, forming a research question. Research questions guide and scope how you're going to search for articles on your topics. You don't want them to be too broad nor too narrow. They should be open-ended, so nothing that just has one definitive answer. And then will often require preliminary or background research and a good amount of brainstorming. So here are a few examples we can look at. How is social media used by journalists? This is pretty broad. That's going to open up way too many uses, most likely, especially today. What social media tools are used by journalists? That's pretty narrow and a pretty closed question. And then one that might hit more of the sweet spot is this last one. What are the different uses and benefits of social media in health communication? So this gives us a specific type of journalism. It is really looking at how social media is being used rather than just is social media being used. So it's a little more precise and it's a little more directed as far as questions go. So one of the first things to consider when you're thinking about searching on your topic is the places where you're going to search. So the starting point will always be sc.edu/libraries. I imagine many of you will just Google Thomas Cooper Library. That's fine too. Just make sure you're Googling Thomas Cooper Library, not necessarily USC libraries and wind up at Southern Cal's library page. Make sure you're with us. And then there's going to be a databases link that we'll demo in a little bit. But the library databases that I suggest as being good starting points for this class are Communication and Mass Media Complete. This will be excellent for scholarly sources related to communication studies. Nexus Uni, this is going to help with identifying and finding news and media sources, which is great for finding examples of things. And then Academic Search Complete is another database that uses the same platform as Communication and Mass Media Complete, and this will help with finding media sources as well as scholarly sources. And then Google's always a great place for finding background information and getting kind of started in brainstorming on your topic. And then Google Scholar is excellent for tracking down scholarly sources that you might run across. And it's not bad for searching on its own. Just remember there's no disciplinary scope to that database like there would be for Communication and Mass Media Complete. We'll talk a little bit more about that before I finish. The other big consideration with searching are the keywords you're going to be using. So what you'll be searching will be informed completely by your research questions and the brainstorming that comes along with those. So with our question, what are the different uses and benefits of social media in health communication? When trying to break that down to being something searchable within a library database especially, we're going to have to do a little bit of work. And that's really just pulling out the main concept keywords from your question and then going from there. So as you can see from the list here, I've taken from this question, health communication. Be hard to research that concept without searching for it, at least at some point. Social media, same thing. And then I went ahead and threw in benefits as well. But not every writer or author that's going to be talking about these are necessarily going to use those exact phrases. Plus, you might want to get more specific and look at specific elements or specific iterations of some of the broader concepts. So just thinking about synonyms, we could, instead of health communication, just health or health care. We could think even more specifically about things like how medical emergencies might be communicated, something like outbreaks, something like food recalls. So all of those could be used in place of health communication in your searching. Same kind of goes for the concept of social media. Well, there are specific types of social media, Twitter, Facebook. I left some out. Instagram, I imagine, could be one worth looking at. A broader term like social platforms. It's not used as much, but maybe capturing something a little bit older, like the concept of Web 2.0. So looking at things like forums. Could all be things sort of within that social media category. And then going with benefits, you could also use the phrase uses, which I even had in my question. Researchers love to use the phrase implications, which could be used as a related phrase here. Also, when searching, you don't necessarily have to use a qualifying phrase like benefits. I could easily start a search with health communications and social media and see what I get. Those qualifying sort of phrases might be baked into some of the results that you're going to get. So the concept here is to come up with as many phrases or key terms that you think would help with illuminating information on your topic, and then mixing and matching. So I'm not saying always search health communications and social media and benefits, or always health and Twitter and uses. Mix them up. Health communication and Facebook and implications. Health communication and social media and implications. Medical emergencies and Twitter and benefits. Something like that, so on and so forth. You want to make sure that you're not just searching 1, 2, maybe even just 3 searches for your topics. You want to really diversify as much as you can, just so you're making sure you can capture as much as might be out there. And this is really essential in doing a literature review specifically. Some other things to consider in relation to search are the scopes of your research questions and or topics at this point. So you want to think about what source types are going to be appropriate for your research. So thinking about the difference between popular and scholarly sources. Popular sources like newspapers and magazines will often help with coming up with examples of things that are going on surrounding your topic. Whereas the scholarly sources are going to be much more in depth and analyze those things that might be happening. So a popular source might tell you about different uses of social media in health communications, where a scholarly source will have primary methodologies that will help with actually measuring the benefits or uses or effectiveness of those social media tactics as related to health communications. Also consider the medium. So you might have a topic that really lends itself to book publication rather than journal articles. But books, journal articles, news sources are all going to be mediums to consider, and that will help inform where you're searching and how you're searching as well. Also think about the currency of your topic. Do you need sources that will give you a historical perspective, or do you need sources that are happening right now? Probably both, depending on your topic. And currency will also help inform how you search and what limiters you might put on your results. And we'll look at that in more detail when we get into the databases. And then also think about the disciplinary scope. There's a good chance that a lot of the topics you're coming up with are multidisciplinary. So think about what disciplines would cover your topic. So think about what subjects might be taught on campus where there would be experts on your topic. And that will also help inform where you search. We're only going to look at one discipline-specific database, but just know that we have hundreds of databases total, each one with very specific scopes, and some are very discipline centered. So think about that as you're thinking about where to search as well. So let's take a look at accessing and searching an article database then. Starting at the library's homepage, library.sc.edu or sc.edu/libraries, or even just Googling Thomas Cooper Library will get you here. And from here, we're kind of just focused on the search options area for now. And specifically, we're going to even kind of skip all this and go straight to databases. This is where you'll get access to actual article databases, so journal articles, newspaper articles, all kinds of different stuff. And we do kind of throw you into the wolves and give you a whole list of all 410 databases, but obviously you can think of some disciplinary scopes. And in this case, I would go ahead and change all subject to whatever subject area or discipline you think would cover your research topic best. In this case, I'm actually going to start with journalism and mass communications. One, because I think it's relevant to the topic that I'm looking at, but also because you're likely to engage with the databases on this list more than any others for this course and within your coursework in general. However, keep in mind we have databases that will cover just about every discipline that's offered on campus. So if you have a topic that's really more wedded to something like education, then check the education databases. And even with the topic that I'm working with health communications, use of social media within health communication, I may even want to jump into, say, a public health database to see what other stuff I can find as well. But for now, let's just look at journalism and mass communications. And the database I wanted to highlight today is one called Communication and Mass Media Complete, and you'll find it right here. And when you click on a database, you should come to this page if you're off campus. If you're on campus, you'll go straight to it. But off campus, or even sometimes on the Wi-Fi, you might be asked to log in with your network username and password. And that's the one that's attached to your email, just the part before the @ So my email is applingm@mailbox.sc.edu. So my username is simply applingm. And then whatever password is associated with that. And that will get you straight to the database. And after it loads, we'll be able to actually search. So here we go. And now I can do a search. And I want to start with just those top concepts from my topic. So we'll start with health communication and social media and see what we get. And with this one, we get a fair amount. 256 is kind of a lot of results to sort through. So there's a couple of things that you'll want to do. One, obviously, definitely take a look at the first few, see if they're even close to what you're looking for. That first one kind of grabbed my attention, so I might look at that one, and I'll at least look at it as a jumping off point in just a second. But there's several things that you could possibly do to help this right away. So one is I noticed with health communication, we're looking at this, I'm getting the word communication and the word social and the word health kind of all over the place. So one thing you can do with your searches when your keywords are multiple word phrases, so you can do what's called a phrase search. And to do that, you just throw quotes around the phrases that you want. Whoops, I accidentally did a search while doing the quotes. So we'll do quotes around both of them and redo the search. And you'll see that we went down from 250 something to 174. So it made it a little bit more precise. The other thing you want to keep in mind are just the other scope notes within your topic. So my original search, if you had noticed, had results coming all the way back from 1991. Social media meant something totally different in 1991 than it has meant since the last 20 years or so. So if I had stuck with that search, I would have definitely wanted to change this publication date up. But 2009 to 2019, pretty good 10-year frame, isn't bad here. Facebook was certainly around, Twitter, YouTube, so most of the major social media platforms would be covered with this date range. However, maybe based on whatever scope you really want to explore within your topic, you might want to put a specific date range. And so I'm just going to choose somewhat randomly to do in the last 5 years. That's really what I'm interested in. And so that brings it down even more. And then the other thing to consider when searching this database, and certainly in other ones, is what source types you get back. And in this case, primarily we're going to get those scholarly peer-reviewed academic journal articles, those things that are going to present original research, or they're going to present meta-analysis, or they're going to have things that might just be lit reviews or systematic reviews. You'll see them also referred to. And the main reason the majority of what you're seeing here is academic journal articles is because this database index is specifically geared toward academic and scholarly work within communications fields. Other databases like Academic Search Complete that we'll look at a little bit later have a much broader disciplinary scope, or in that case, it's a multidisciplinary scope. So this one, expect mostly academic journal articles, which is good. And as I scroll through, there's some ones that are actually looking pretty good. I kind of like this subculture-centered public health communication. That one looks good. It has a specific social media strategy that they look at. But one that I noticed earlier that I really like is number 9, tweeting as health communication. And it looks like it will give me specific uses of public engagement using a specific social media platform, and in this case, Twitter. When you find something that you like, click on it. You'll land on the items record page. And this is really the page that you're really searching in this database, and all EBSCO databases for that matter, where you're really searching the metadata or the data that's attached to the description of an article. So we're never searching the full text of an article within this database, really just the things that describe it. So for example, the title, the source sometimes, and in this case, definitely, because it's the Journal of Health Communication, and then definitely the subject terms and the abstract. So I'd say the best way to use a page like this is just kind of peruse it. Definitely read the abstract, make sure that it's going to be about what you'd expect it to be about. And then the other thing is the subject terms can be really, really helpful. These can provide basically supplied keywords, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But obviously, when you find something you like, you'll want the full text. You can click PDF full text, and it usually will open in a window like so, whereas here you can download it, and then it's yours to keep. You can save it directly to a Google Drive if you have a Google Drive set up. That's a really efficient way to save your PDFs and documents that you find. Obviously, you can print it. Lots of other things that you can do. Going back to the items record page, looking at these subject terms, now's the time where I might say, okay, well, here's a really specific use of Twitter. What are some other ways that I could find maybe examples or analysis of specifically the use of Twitter? And so then I could come back and just start mining some of these subject terms. So I kind of like the idea of medical communication over health communication. Maybe that's a little more precise. And the reason I point out these subject terms too is because these are what's called controlled vocabulary. So these are pretty much system attached keywords is a way you can kind of think of them. So they're used to describe the contents of this particular article, but since they're controlled vocabulary, they're likely to have other articles that use these phrases as well. And so I kind of like going with medical communication over health communication. And then instead of social media, I'm going to do that specific platform, Twitter. And then I kind of want to borrow one more concept from here, and I'm just copying and pasting these. Now these subject terms are hot links as well. I could click and find every single article that is attached to medical communication. However, I like to use them in Boolean AND searches so that I can get a little bit more specific. So now that I have some extra keywords, I can search it, and you'll see that this is a much more narrow set of results. 3 total, and including the one we were looking at, so really 2 additional ones. But it's nice because you know that these 2 additional sources are going to be very specific and are going to cover kind of exactly what I was looking for. So now I can look at this one that's mapping of health communication and education strategies, addressing the public health dangers of illicit online pharmacies. That's an interesting use of social media for health communications. And then there's one that's even more specific. Uncharted waters communicating health risks during the 2014 West Virginia water crisis. And this one would probably be a deep analysis of how well using Twitter or whatever other forms of social media strategies were used by whatever entity was communicating about this. Oh, and I didn't even notice, but this is actually done by some of the faculty here at USC. In fact, it looks, yeah, both with the Arnold School of Public Health and the School of Journalism and Mass Comm. So that was sort of a happy accident. But looks like it's displaying an original study of a social media tactic that was used for health communication. And again, PDF full text, all that good stuff. The one other tool that I will point out at this point is the cite button over on the right. This can help with citing the sources that you find. An APA definitely listed as one of this style formats. Just remember too that EBSCO even says, hey, pay close attention to personal names, capitalizations, dates, all that good stuff. Because they're not always loaded correctly. There's no human that's actually checking the accuracy of these, so you be that human. One of the things I've noticed fairly rampantly is you'll see email addresses after their names. Obviously cut those out before you turn that in. But this should at least give you the elements that you will need for completing a good citation for each of your sources. And as far as anything else goes, it's really just a matter of searching around. And we'll look at Academic Search Complete in a little while, which also looks at EBSCO host, and we'll get a couple other tips and tricks from then. Now let's quickly look at one more database that can be found on the Journalism and Mass Communications page, and that's Nexus Uni. And this one, for the sake of this class, it's really for finding media pieces, specifically newspaper articles. So we'll click into that. And since I've already logged into one database, it should open up right away. As it does. Fantastic. So one quick note about Nexus Uni is it is very large in scope, but sort of random in the things that it really covers. So it covers, if you look under guided search, you'll see it covers news, law cases, law reviews, and then company info. And you can also search for a specific publication. So when you know you're just searching for news items, you do want to go down to guided search and select news and make sure that's what you're searching. If you start searching up here, there's a good chance you'll get law cases, maybe companies, depending on what you're searching for, and things that might not be that relevant to what you're looking for. So if you do news, you can go from there. And you can choose a date range if you have a specific one in mind, but we'll go ahead and just leave it blank for now. And from here we can do some searching. And I kind of liked the things that we were looking at in the previous database, and it kind of had me thinking of different keywords. So I kind of like the concept of looking up any article that might talk about a health emergency and how it might have been communicated through social media. And I kind of want to go ahead and throw in that concept of communication just to kind of help this database along. And one thing to keep in mind with Nexus Uni is it does do full text searching. So instead of just searching through the actual descriptions of an article, it searches within the actual text. And so I would always expect to find more items within news. The other thing about Nexus Uni is that it's not just the United States' publications that they're looking through. There's going to be, or there could be, a lot of different international sources. But just looking through, we've got one from U.S. Official News that's talking about Medicare and Medicaid programs for emergency preparedness. This actually looks like more of a federal government information document. There's a CNN transcript that's talking about an interview with a Democrat from California, and it looks like it's talking about a certain health emergency. But one thing that you can and probably should keep in mind is, again, the different ways you can kind of sort your results. One thing I would recommend doing is looking through the location by publication. This will actually help you narrow down, we're going to go to more. This will actually help you say, okay, we really just want publications that are published in the United States. And then we still get some of the same stuff. I don't know if we want something from the Federal Register, but looking at an article from the U.S. Official News that was about a false alert in Arkansas and whether or not you can really trust a tweet for emergency communications, that would be worth taking a look at as an example of how maybe it doesn't always work that well. And then the other thing to keep in mind with Nexus Uni is anything you find in here, full text right there. It's not going to be pretty in that it doesn't always look exactly like, or rather, it will never look exactly like the original publication, but it will at least be the text. But I'm not really satisfied with that one. Let's see what else we can maybe find. And one thing that you might also want to keep in mind, and we'll just kind of skip this search for now and try it again in a different way. I kind of at least want to keep these keywords, so I'm going to keep those. Then I'm actually going to go back and do one extra thing that could be really helpful to know about in searching Nexus Uni. So instead of just searching for all the news that might be out there, you can search through a specific publication. And so if you go click a publication here under the guided search starter set, you can come over and say find publication, enter publication's name. So maybe we just want to see if the New York Times has ever reported anything on health emergency communication in social media. So we can select New York Times. And this is important to know too. Whenever you want to look for a specific publication, you do actually have to pick the entry that they give you here. So if I were to finish typing New York Times and click search, it would actually say, no, you actually have to pick this. So I have to pick one, and that's fine. We'll pick New York Times. Then we'll enter our search and see what we get. Before I click search though, just know pretty much any of the larger publications that you can think of should be covered here. So New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, LA Times, all the big ones will be here with the exception of just a few, like Wall Street Journal is in another database called Factiva. That's one of the few that isn't covered very well here. And so I can do my search, and it's just searching within New York Times. And because it's only searching in that publication, I would expect there to be less items. And here they are. It definitely is much fewer than I had before. And so we get one about addiction and redemption, get one on fathers and sons that are really, it looks like it's more about a film, but I kind of like this one where it's a story about how a Florida sheriff posted graphic overdose video to combat opioid crisis. Very specific use of social media for displaying some information on a health emergency. And so you can go through, read it, all that good stuff. There are subjects attached, so you could get some more ideas for keywords that way. And then also, if you're going to be citing anything from Nexus Uni, the export citation button is right here. It's the same deal. You pick your style. Here we've got APA, and then you've got all of at least the information that you would need. I would still definitely cross-check it with a citation guide of some sort, which I'll show you one that the library provides before this video is over. But with Nexus Uni, really it's just a matter of searching around, seeing what you can do. Now you know how you can search through the whole system, and you can search on a topic for a very specific publication, like the New York Times. Now let's quickly look at one more database that I think would be really helpful to be able to search for this class, and really any class beyond this. And this one is called Academic Search Complete. From the A to Z databases page, so that first page that you land on when you click databases, you'll find the link to Academic Search Complete all over the place. It's always the top one under popular databases. Since it starts with A, it's also right here on the original landing page, but you'll even notice it when you get into certain subject areas because it covers so many different disciplines. So we can use whatever link you see first, really, and I always use that popular one, and click Academic Search Complete. And you'll see it looks very much, actually it looks pretty much the same as Communications and Mass Media Complete. However, it doesn't have that specific disciplinary communication scope. This one is much more multidisciplinary, so you can find things from all over the place: public health, education, still probably communications, all different things. And so you can come in and start searching pretty much the same way that we have. I liked my health emergency, if I can spell it right, and social media search. So let's see what we get here and see if it's any different. Okay, so we got 105. The very first one looks really relevant. I'm going to come back to that one in just a second. But again, you'll still want to consider your different scopes If I was setting a 5-year date range before, I probably want to do a similar date range here. And then the other thing to keep in mind is with Academic Search Complete, it's still primarily academic journals, as you can see, but I would expect to see more magazine results, maybe even some news items, and they also tend to have these associated press videos that might come out as well. And again, take a look at some things like that as you need examples of things from media pieces. But either way, you should be covered in this database. And here it's the exact same thing as before, where we're clicking into it, maybe taking a look at the items record page for any other help. You'll see that this one is definitely going to have a different scope, as it's from a journal called Social Science Computer Review. So that's looking at it a little in a slightly different lens than what we were looking before. But subject terms are still very relevant. Crisis communication, social media, public health, all of those things could be definitely helpful. But its mechanics are exactly the same as we saw before. But while I'm here, and this is true when you start in Communication and Mass Media Complete as well, we have this tool available to us by way of this Choose Databases links, where you can actually add EBSCO databases and indexes to your searches. So I could definitely do the search for Academic Search Complete, but I could go ahead and add, say, Communications and Mass Media, or I could add, let's see, I could add Medline, which is a public health database or medical database. And that way I've got two other specific disciplines covered with my search. And you would expect the results to go up a good bit. And then as you go through, you can even see what database these are coming from, which should be helpful in casting that search net out a little bit even farther than you were before. And certainly I still, for the sake of illustration, like to go to individual ones, but obviously you could start in Communications and Mass Media, add relevant indexes, and then go from there. And then one more trick that I wanted to share with you is the use of Google Scholar to track down specific journal articles. So remember our article, Tweeting is Health Communication, example that we saw earlier. This was something that I were reading, and as I was reading it, I'd be paying attention to the in-text citations, and as I see something that I thought was really important to expand on, I could go down to the bibliography at the end, often called references or works cited, all pretty much the same thing. I could go through and I could see the different sources that they use. And maybe I like this article, Engaging Stakeholders Through Twitter, how nonprofit organizations are getting more out of 140 characters or less. This would be a good study of the actual use of Twitter. And so what I would do is just go ahead and copy that title, whichever way you're most comfortable with, and then head over to scholar.google.com. And if you're not familiar with this, the main thing is knowing that you can actually link Google Scholar with our library holdings. So if you find something here, you wouldn't keep getting stuck in the loop of hitting paywalls. If we have it, you'd actually be able to get the full text. In order to do that, though, you do have to set your library links. So from this page, just click your hamburger menu, look for Settings, and then from Settings, Library Links. And what you would actually be doing is searching University of South Carolina. And you'd get several things, but you want, obviously, USC Columbia, full text at USC Columbia. Check that box, click Save, and once you do that, unless you change browsers often or you get a new computer, once you set it, you should be able to forget it. And then, I think the most efficient use is searching for those specific journal titles. And you can search and you see the Google Scholar entry for this particular item and then full text at USC Columbia. I could click there and it would take me to our actual holding, where you can then download the PDF from there. One thing that's also helpful is when you are needing those citation, some help with your citations, Google Scholar actually does a pretty good job too. So if you're not finding it directly in databases that you see, you can click those little quote icon within Google Scholar, and it will help you out with that as well. Now, of course, you can search Google Scholar for your topics also. Just know that there is no disciplinary scope within this, so you wouldn't be getting the nice just journals from communications, the communications field and that kind of stuff. So this first one, for example, is through PubMed. It looks like, so it's very public health, and it looks like most of these are public health promotion, which isn't a big deal. It's just keep that in mind if you do decide to search Google Scholar for scholarly literature. Also to keep in mind is there's no way of knowing how often they update these. EBSCO, it's more transparent. They update pretty much constantly as far as adding things that are being indexed. So I would recommend still starting in the library databases, but no, Google Scholar is a good backup and is an especially efficient tool for tracking down specific journal articles. And as a librarian, I'd feel remiss if I didn't speak a little bit on citations, since this is going to be a big part of what you'll have to provide for your literature review. Basically, citations are the thing that provide a map back to the source, and that's why you want them to be accurate, so that readers can be able to know where you got your information, and if they feel the need to go back and either check or explore something further, they can do so. So each citation, no matter what style is being used, will always contain author or publisher name, item title, publication title, and by item title, I mean article title. Publication title, so what journal or what newspaper or magazine it's published in, a date, and then we'll often include places and or links as well. And so a good APA style citation will look like this. It will have the author listed first, it'll have the date, and it'll have the article title, then the journal title, which will be in italics, then the volume and issue number, and the volume will be in italics, but the issue will not. And then page numbers, and then some sort of URL or DOI number, which will be specific. That's called direct object identifier. It just depends on what's available to you. More often than not, you are seeing DOIs available, so add the DOI. In that case, you don't even have to retrieve from, you just do DOI and then that specific number. I hope that this kind of crash course has helped with introducing you to the library resources that are available to you as a student at USC. But there are ways to get further help. There's a library guide, we call them LibGuides, specifically for journalism. The URL can be found here on this slide, or you can find it by clicking the Get Research Help link that you'll find on the library's homepage. That link will also guide you to the Citations Library Guide. Also, again, the link to that specifically to APA can be found here as well. That will help give you basically a list of examples that you can cross-reference with. We also have an Ask a Librarian button that you'll find all over the library's website. In fact, it follows you around as you go through the library's website. It's usually in the bottom left corner. It's also embedded, as I mentioned before, within EBSCO databases. There's also a Book a Librarian option that you'll find, again, on the Get Research Help page. And in that scenario, basically, you can pick a librarian that seems like they would be the best for your research endeavor. So every librarian is attached to some school on campus. So if it were for this class, you'd probably pick me. However, if it was an education topic, you might want to pick Marilee Birchfield, who's our education librarian. And of course, you can contact me directly at applingm@mailbox.sc.edu with any questions you might have, and certainly feel free to send questions also through your professor, who will get them to me. So hopefully this helps, but certainly reach out as you have questions when you go along with the research part of this course. Thank you very much.